Hey guys, thanks for joining me in part 3 of our instructional models series. So today in class we took a look at a perfect classroom. I had you design your perfect classroom, and I bet you're probably wondering why. So what I'd like to do now is take a minute to go into a little bit more detail about one model that is emerging in the world of education, and people are wondering if this is actually going to take over the traditional model of education. So what we have is the traditional model currently is very teacher-centered. The flipped model, as it's called, is very student-centered. What we have happen is students are watching a video posted online by their teachers, and that's essentially their homework. So then they come to class the next day and they're able to interact with their peers and with their teacher so that they can get a better understanding of the application of all this content. So just looking at that in a little bit more detail, some differences, you're going to see that the amount of time spent doing independent practice and really, again, applying that information is drastically increased in a flipped classroom. Although there's not one specific way that you have to run a flipped classroom, so teachers can do it a bunch of different ways. There's a lot of variety and versions. It can be really low tech, and it can be really high tech. Sometimes the videos might even be watched in class. What you're going to find is that essentially it's really all about maximizing the time that you can differentiate the instruction. And so what that means is real time spent with students trying to help them understand so that they're not getting frustrated at home, and they're able to actually succeed with mastering the content. Okay, so not every single lesson is going to be flipped. It doesn't have to be, but it can be. Some best practices, however, when you are flipping your classroom, is that you want to have clear expectations. So what that means is that you want to usually start your year off with a video, probably to your parents as well as your students, modeling in the same method that you're going to use, and giving them a really clear guideline for what you expect of them and what they can expect from you. So that's a really important part of starting off a flipped classroom. You also want to make sure that you're doing your own videos whenever possible. It is possible to go online and to use some videos like the Khan Academy or something like that, but really creating a relationship and being able to see your teacher is an important part of the learning process, and it's going to really build some engagement for students. So it's important that whenever possible you can use even a low-tech method like the one that we're using here to kind of just create that video and that content yourself. You want to try and scaffold the rollout or the implementation of a classroom like this. So what that means is that you don't want to just have your students come to class the first day and tell them that you're going to have a flipped classroom and that's that. What you want to do is actually go ahead and maybe the first few weeks of school you watch the videos in class, and so you can really model what it's going to look like. You can teach them how to take notes and how to interact with the videos so that they're not just, again, passively watching, because like any instructional model, this is all about the implementation. And so if students just go home and passively watch the video, then they're not really going to be having a different experience than they would originally. You also may want to scaffold throughout the course of a student's career, so to speak, in education, the amount of time that they're spending watching these videos. So at an elementary level, it may be a 1-minute video shown in class probably, but made available online for reteaching, and so that the parents can actually interact with that content. And eventually in middle school, what used to be a 30-minute lesson might now be 6 minutes. And at the high school level, you could have a 60-minute lesson now be 10 minutes. So really condensing that material and making it much more efficient and to the point is really going to help. Being collaborative in this process to make it manageable for teachers and to make it a better experience for students, it's fun to have a partner and to create these videos with a colleague. And finally, the best part about this is that you can have your students do the same thing. So your students can actually go ahead and make their own videos as evidence of their learning after a class. And so it's kind of fun for them to engage in the same practices that they saw you, kind of modeling for them. And then it's really evident of what they've learned and what they haven't, and they find that by teaching somebody, they're able to demonstrate that. So just a reminder again that you should be kind of following along, taking notes here. If you haven't been, you can pause and rewind at any time. But why bother with this whole flipped classroom thing? So right now in the world of education, we're finding that students are struggling to be college and career ready. We're finding evidence of that, and the engagement very basically is just not working. Students are not engaged in their learning, they don't feel a connection to school, they think that school is something that's done to them instead of something that they are able to participate in and that will benefit them. So we need to change that. We also, are finding that teachers are suffering as a result because they're there to help kids. Really, that's what they're all about. And when they feel like they can't help the kids, they're finding that they're not feeling so good about what they're doing, and so they're putting a lot of pressure on themselves. So this flipped classroom and building that engagement can also help that. And finally, at the root of all these problems is really this ability to differentiate. We need to find ways to really authentically differentiate. As a chemistry teacher who's trying to do small group instruction, I try and run mini lessons, and I try and cycle all my kids through those mini lessons. What I find is that I can't actually get through all those groups in a timely manner because kids have questions. And so the kids that are not with me currently learning the information and are supposed to be practicing applying it aren't able to get help from me when they need it. And that's really frustrating to them. And so this would be a great model for me to be able to implement in my class that would hopefully alleviate some of that frustration for the students and for myself. How did this all get started? This is a really great story. There was a baseball coach, and he is just outside of Detroit, Michigan, and his name is Greg Green, and he was putting videos online of his son as he was doing some baseball moves, and he put it online for the rest of the team to practice. And all of a sudden he had this idea because he happened to be a principal as well as a curriculum coordinator for the secondary level, and he said, what if we could do this with students? So he went to his social studies teacher and they came up with a plan, and we'll hear a little bit more about that data in just a minute. And then also in Colorado, there were two chemistry teachers, Aaron Sams and John Bergman, and they were finding that they had a lot of absent students, so mostly due to the weather. And they found that they could put the videos online and the students would be able to catch up with everything. And they're actually now working on developing the professional development system for this whole model along with Pearson and George Mason University. So going back to that data from the Clinton-Dale School, what happened was that they found that the failing rates drastically improved. So we went from 2009, where we were designated as the lowest 5% of schools, and then they implemented in the fall of 2010 the flipped classroom just in the social studies, the subject of social studies, and then they were having so much success and the students loved it so much that they changed it to be all of the grade 9 kids. And then finally in 2011 they implemented it in the whole school because they had so much success, and they're the first school that's completely flipped. Everything that they do is in a flipped model. And they're finding that it's having great results for their students. So what are some benefits of this model? So I mentioned before that you can pause and rewind, which is really important. You can also see that the parents and the students are really creating some buy-in for parents and students. They're really engaged with this model, and they're finding that it's improving not only the actual performance of students, but the feeling in the classroom as well. This allows the teachers to build relationships with their students. So when the students are in the classroom working on things, the teachers are actually able to have individual conversations and really humanize and personalize this curriculum. In addition to that, it's improving the teacher quality because the teachers are reflecting on their practices before they're making their videos and figuring out what is the need to know for their students, as well as they're then able to engage in professional conversations about the things that they're doing and how they're different from their teachers, and they're finding that they're improving their instruction through the process as well. My favorite part of this is that parents can actually engage with the content and see what their students are learning. And with the rigorous curriculum that's being implemented, the parents are able to finally feel that they can help their students. And I think that that creates such an important connection and, again, creates some value for that education for them. So now that would be something that, again, kind of scaffolding that from the elementary levels up, we're hopefully going to create a lot more parent and community involvement in the education of our kids. Finally, the support of the Common Core standards and the College and Career Readiness standards, we're able to use more class time for investigation and to do some critical thinking skills, and there's less gaps because the kids aren't able to hide And we're not aiming for the middle anymore, we're really trying to get at each kid. Some considerations, things to be aware of. In all the research that has been done, which isn't a lot, which is one of the things that may be considered a slightly negative part of this model, being able to implement this, just like any other model, is really the key to success. So we need to make sure that we're providing all the resources that our teachers need, professional development and technology for our students. The technology aspect is actually not as difficult as you might think. There's a lot of students who have access to their cell phones, their iPods, they can watch videos on their way home, they can stay after school, they can come early, you can burn DVDs, you can give them a jump drive, they can watch a CD on their gaming system. You just have to really think outside the box and remember that this is something that if we believe is good for kids, we need to find a way to make happen. If the kids aren't watching the videos, we want to make sure that we are trying to encourage them to do that, but obviously they need to watch them when they get to class. And so having a few computers that are available for them would be a way to differentiate that. And then finally, is it different enough? We want to make sure that our curriculum is not just stuck in the same system as before. So while this may be a really good start, eventually we may be able to think of ways that would support this that may be a little bit more revolutionary. And finally, making sure that you're keeping your focus on kids instead of just your technology and your videos. The flipped classroom is not just another term, it's not just another thing that teachers do, and it's not just something to do so that you can kind of make some cool videos. Really, this is about making the best possible education and curriculum for kids. So keeping that in mind, I want you guys to go ahead and finalize any thoughts that you have in your notes. And hopefully you're at the point where you can take that and apply it a little bit and kind of interact with this material out in the real world. So I want you to apply this by going to our blog, if you haven't already, and trying to connect this with some other terms that you have hopefully encountered before, but you may need to look up. So some terms like mastery learning, distance learning, online learning, blended learning. Is a flipped classroom the same thing? Is it different? Is it part of those? Are those things part of a flipped classroom? Kind of just summarize the relationship between those things, okay? If you struggle with that at all, don't worry. You can bring your notes to class tomorrow and we'll start off by going over any questions that you might have, and we'll make sure that you understand before we move on, okay? Thanks, guys.